This video was initially posted in mid-September about Elizabeth Holmes, an entrepreneur who is on trial for fraudulent behavior. And at the moment, the news is reporting that she is testifying on her own behalf. But what is interesting here is the astrology of it, because you can see that her transits are pretty complicated, and since you can anticipate that the trial is likely to be over either soon or maybe at the latest into the new year, or if you look really far ahead, perhaps in the spring, and yet you can see what is happening with her planetary transits and the kind of outcome that we're likely to see. This is one chart where I would be fascinated to find a verified birth time in order to more accurately hone in on what has already happened and what is likely to transpire next. And yet, even with just her day positions, the chart for Elizabeth Holmes is quite revealing both for character and in regard to the timing of events. Given the trajectory of her journey into a fame that turned into infamy, the subject of blood seems to be critical to the story. A Capricorn Mercury with a sextile to Saturn tells us she's no dummy. This is a solid strategic thinker, and when we notice Mercury in an almost exact ninth harmonic aspect to her natal Pluto, we know the thinking is naturally deep and insightful. But that S next to the Pluto informs us that it was stationary at birth. In fact, it was dead stopped stationary on her day of birth, which means this planet was very dominant in her makeup. And though the strengths become penetrating insight and relentless commitment to causes, the dark side of what is effectively excessive Pluto energy is obsession and paranoia, which according to the tale that is told, she began to suffer from as her company got into trouble. And to be honest, I would not be surprised to learn it was there all along, even when things were doing well. When you're looking for blood, look to Mars. And if you see it conjunct Saturn and square the Sun, you understand she wants to organize, structure, and control Saturn, blood, Mars. And because it links to Aquarius, she wants to essentially technologize it, use some kind of fancy robotic system to change, transform Mars, Saturn, and Scorpio the way things had been done with this topic up to now. All of this is great, but as it turned out, when her methods eventually came to light, her vision and ambition were far bigger than her ability to actually make it happen in a realistic way. And instead of changing her approach or going back to the drawing board, she decided instead to pretend it was working in order to keep the investors happy. If you're looking for an explanation for this behavior, you would likely find it in a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, since nothing like Jupiter for keeping your optimism going no matter what, and Neptune for making up a story that isn't true, but sounds like it might be. And if Neptune can mean the lie on the dark side, Jupiter likes to go big, so now you have a big lie. At one point, she claimed her company had earned 100 million in a year when it was really only 100,000. Really good scientists who knew about her aims with these rapid tests she wanted to do with minimal blood to get super important data very quickly were saying it couldn't be done. She was trying to get vast amounts of data from a few droplets of blood derived from the tip of a finger. And when she was questioned or criticized, her reply was, well, that's what they always say, but then when I succeed, they'll say I changed the world. Credit to her for continuing to believe in her own vision, but it's hard to agree with her attitude that it was okay to lie, cheat, and deceive in order to get there. The origins of her company go back to as early as 2004, when she was starting to raise money for her big project, with Saturn transiting opposite her Sun to correlate with an ambitious quest one wants to take on. And then things began to accelerate in 2010, when the 6 million she had raised in 2004 was by now 92 million, and she was getting big names like former Secretary of State George Shultz to endorse her cause. She continued rolling along for a few more years, gathering fame and notoriety as a both present time and upcoming brilliant entrepreneur, due to become a multi-billionaire. But then the cracks began to appear as we get into the 2014-2015 period, with transiting Saturn squaring her Sun, And by the time we get into 2016 and beyond, her scam was being uncovered and her 800-employee company began to fall apart, so that by 2018, it had completely cratered and her riches had turned to mostly rags, and worse still, criminal investigations into her long-term fraud were already underway by mid-2018, and in an illustration of just how slow the legal system can be, particularly when you have access to expensive lawyers, which he did, her actual trial was only due to start by August of 2020, and due to the COVID pandemic, it actually started a full year later in this past August of 2021. Now, her astrological problem is that Saturn is ominously transiting near her Sun, even as Uranus squares it from Taurus, and this will continue the rest of this year and all of next year. Plus, Saturn and Mars are on the other end of that. In the context of being embroiled in a trial in which the evidence against you looks to be pretty strong and very hard to get around, this is very unfavorable astrology with a good number of possible alignments that can be devastating to your fortune. For example, if any of these planets have connections to her 12th house, she might find herself incarcerated for a significant period of time.